Hi, my name is Georgette&KARI.
And my name is Carrie Bragg.
Today we will presenting Boehm family system theory.
Today, we'll be going over the origin, key concepts, and techniques associated with Bowen family systems therapy. When talking about the origin of Bowen family systems theory, first we need to talk about Murray Bowen. Murray Bowen developed family systems theory. He was the oldest of 5 children, born on January 31st, 1913, in the small town of Waverly, Tennessee. He graduated from the University of Tennessee with a bachelor's degree in science in 1934. Bowen worked as an intern at Bellevue Hospital in New York City and later at Grasslands Hospital in Valhalla, New York. Shortly after, he served in the military for 5 years, and it was here that he began to develop an interest in psychiatry. Murray Bowen was a 20th century psychiatrist who developed family systems theory, also known as Bowen family system theory. Dr. Murray Bowen, a psychiatrist, developed the family systems theory starting in the mid-1950s. After completing his medical training and serving in the Army, he worked at the National Institute of Mental Health, otherwise known as NIMH, where he conducted research exploring family relationships and constructs while working with parents of children experiencing schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a mental health issue typically recognized as a disintegration of thinking processes and emotional responsiveness. It's often associated with psychosis and also hallucinations and delusions. Bowen argued that schizophrenia was the result of several generations of dysfunction and developed family systems theory because he believed that the family was the primary source of emotions and personality. Bowen went on to further develop the theory, which became a popular form of family system therapy. At Georgetown, Bowen began his multi-generational research on families, including his own. His theory offers a transgenerational view of the family system and operates on the premise that families can be best understood from a 3-generation perspective. It is important to understand the key theoretical tenets of Bowen family systems therapy. Family is an emotional unit where members are connected emotionally. People are influenced by their family, but each person also influences their entire family. Individual behavior must be considered from the context of the family system where interactions and patterns are predictable, creating repetitive cycles. Bowen family systems therapy identifies transgenerational issues in a family system. Bowen family systems therapy takes a transgenerational view of the family systems and emphasizes the need to separate thoughts and feelings. It also emphasizes the need to separate the self from others. This is called differentiation and is the major goal of this approach. The focus of Bowen family systems theory is built around 8 key concepts. These concepts are differentiation of self, triangles, nuclear family emotional systems, the family projection process, emotional cutoff, the multi-generational transmission process, sibling position, and societal emotional process. I will be talking about all of these concepts in more detail in the following slides. Differentiation of self is the first key concept. The underlying assumption is that social groups affect how those within the group think, feel, and act. The less developed the self, the more impact the group has on the individual. A poorly differentiated person depends more on the acceptance and approval of others. They might engage in people-pleasing or bullying and controlling. People pleasers adapt to what they think others want or expect of them, while bullies push people into agreeing with them. Both of these tactics are ways of getting people to accept them. A well-differentiated person has a realistic dependence on others. They can stay calm even when experiencing conflict, criticism, or rejection. The big difference between the well-differentiated and poorly differentiated is the ability to distinguish between thoughts rooted in facts versus thoughts clouded by emotions. The next concept is triangles. If we're thinking about systems, a two-person system is not as stable as a three-person system. A two-person system cannot tolerate much tension before involving a third person. A triangle, on the other hand, can tolerate a lot more tension without involving another person because there are 3 different relationships within a triangle. Any tension present between 2 people in the triangle can quickly shift within that triangle to one of the other relationships. I'm going to explain how this works in the next slide. I'm going to use an example here to help clarify the concept of triangles. In a triangle, there are 3 positions, 2 insiders and 1 outsider. Imagine a triangle consisting of a mom, a dad, and a child. In a time of calm, so for example, when the marriage is going well and there are no problems or conflicts with the child, the parents are the 2 insiders while the child is the outsider. Now imagine the father starts working more and more hours at work, leaving the mother home to tend to the child. The mother is not happy with this and starts feeling overwhelmed. She might start saying things to the father like, "You work too much and you don't spend enough time with us." This creates tension between the insiders, and the insider, who is the most uncomfortable, in this case, we'll say the mother, moves toward the outsider to help relieve some of that tension. So this could look like the mother devoting more time and more attention to the child, perhaps in an effort to make sure the child feels loved despite the absence of the father. The mother and the child are now the insiders, and the father is now the outsider. Now let's imagine that the child starts acting out, and the mother begins feeling even more overwhelmed, and she just can't deal with it. She can't deal with the child's behavior. So she might then go to the father and say something like, "Look what our child's doing. I can't manage this alone. I need you to help. Do something." The father is then pulled in to deal with the child, and he moves to an insider position. And at the same time, the mother moves to an outsider position. So in this case, the outsider position is the desirable position. Now I'm going to explain nuclear family emotional systems. There are 4 basic relationship patterns that govern where problems develop in a family. The first, marital conflict. So in marital conflict, there is increased tension and increased anxiety. Each spouse focuses on what is wrong with the other, tries to control the other, and also resists being controlled. The next pattern is dysfunction in a spouse. This happens when one spouse pressures the other to be a certain way. Both accommodate to preserve peace, but one accommodates more. If tension increases further, the spouse who has been accommodating more ends up yielding even more of themselves, which can increase their anxiety and lead to psychiatric, medical, and/or social dysfunction. The next pattern is impairment of one or more children. And so when this happens, it can cause excessive worry, and the anxiety is focused on the child or children. The more the parents focus on the child, the more the child focuses on them. It becomes like a cycle. The child ends up being more reactive to parents' attitudes and expectations. This can lead to the child having poor differentiation of self. With emotional distance, which is the fourth pattern, an individual might distance themselves from a relationship that is too intense. The problem with this is that they risk becoming too isolated. The more tension and anxiety one person or relationship absorbs, the less others must absorb. Some family members maintain their functioning at the expense of others. So an example of this might be one sibling taking care of elderly parents while the others don't have anything to do with that at all. Family projection process. Children inherit many kinds of problems through their relationships with their parents. Relationship sensitivities, like increased need for approval and attention, difficulty dealing with expectations, and tendency to blame self or others, feeling responsible for others' happiness, or that others are responsible for their happiness, acting impulsively to relieve anxiety instead of being able to tolerate momentary discomfort, and act thoughtfully. All of the above can increase tension and anxiety in the system. So there's a 3-step process involved here. So the parent focuses on the child out of fear that something is wrong with the child. The parent interprets the child's behavior as confirming their fear. And then the parent ends up treating the child as if something really is wrong with the child. Just to make it a little bit more clear, an example of this 3-step process might look like this. The youngest child, after graduating from high school, doesn't seem to have any ambition to do anything with his life. The mother can't understand this because her older children all went on to have successful jobs and lives after they were finished with school. The mother then begins focusing more of her attention on the child because she's worried something is wrong. The youngest child continues to not seem interested in pursuing a career and only holds a job for a short time before quitting. This behavior confirms to the mother that something is wrong. And once it's confirmed, the 3rd step happens. She begins treating him as if something really is wrong. She offers more financial support. She tries to help him find and apply for jobs. She is also constantly making suggestions about what he might do with his life. She is essentially treating him as if something is really wrong. This can affect the way the child sees himself and also affect his motivation. It's almost like enabling. Emotional cutoff is a way of managing unresolved emotional issues with family members. This can be done by completely cutting off or limiting emotional contact. When a person cuts their family off, it can make them more reliant on newer relationships, which can make that person vulnerable to either pressuring the new relationship to be a certain way, or by being more accommodating themselves so they don't jeopardize the new relationship. An example of this is Jack gets married, and he and his spouse move away to live near the ocean, like they've always wanted. Jack's mother is very upset that he now lives so far away. When she calls him on the phone, she'll spend most of the conversation talking about how much she misses him, how she wishes he lived closer so he would help her with some of the problems she has around the house, and generally just makes him feel guilty for moving away. He gets the sense that his mother thinks it was selfish for him to move away, even though it was a dream he and his wife had, and they are generally very happy living near the ocean. Jack had gotten to the point where he dreads his mother's phone calls because they make him feel so guilty. It's gotten so bad that he's started to resent his mother, and he wishes she could just be happy for him. To reduce the tension, anxiety, and all-around bad feelings that these phone calls bring up, Jack has started letting his mother's phone calls go to voicemail. He's found that he's leaning more on his wife, and when they get into the occasional argument, he's begun feeling more fear of losing her and will sometimes censor what he wants to say in order to keep the peace with his wife. It could be that because he's engaging in emotional cutoff with his mother, he's become more reliant on the relationship with his wife and doesn't want to jeopardize this relationship. Multi-generational transmission process. This explains how certain patterns have played out or been transmitted from one generation to the next. Small differences in the level of differentiation between parents and their children can lead to bigger differences in differentiation among members of an extended family. So imagine a family with 2 children. One child may be more differentiated from the family, and the other less differentiated from the family. These 2 children go on to have their own families. The well-differentiated sibling may have a better chance of having well-differentiated children of their own. The less differentiated sibling is more likely to have children who are less differentiated themselves. In this way, traits and patterns can vary as they travel through the generations. Bowen liked the work of Walter Toman, a psychologist who had done research on sibling position, so he incorporated it into his family systems theory. One idea is that those who grow up in the same sibling position have predictable traits. For instance, older children have a tendency to be leaders, while youngest children prefer to be followers. One is not better than the other, but they're seen as being complementary. This can be important when looking at marriages. For instance, I'm the oldest sibling, and according to this theory, I would have greatest chance of a successful marriage if I married someone who was the youngest child in their family. Good news for me, because my partner is the youngest in his family. My tendency to want to be a leader complements his being a good follower. And even if a youngest child wants to be in charge, their leadership style may be a bit different than what might typically be found in an older sibling. Finally, the last concept I'm going to talk about is societal emotional process. So Bowen's concepts can be applied to groups other than families, such as work and social organizations. Symptoms of societal regression include an increase in crime and violence, more divorces, greater polarization between racial groups, less principled decision-making by leaders, more substance abuse, and people becoming more concerned about their rights rather than their responsibilities. Periods of regression and progression have occurred throughout history. Bowen predicted that a final major crisis would come, and the humans who survive will be those who can live in harmony with nature. So I'll just talk about this a little bit more to make it a little bit more concrete. Our current regression is thought to be a result of anxiety created by the world's increasing population, the depletion of natural resources, issues like global warming, and conflict. So Bowen thought that we would continue dealing with symptoms of these individual crises until we're finally forced to deal with the anxiety fueling them. Bowen says that it is more difficult to raise children in periods of social regression and easier in calmer times. So it sort of seems like we're in a more difficult time right now. If we think about the times we're in now, we can see examples of this. So parents worry about drug and alcohol use by their children. We see stories all the time about children being abducted or some other terrible thing on the news that frightens parents into putting an increased focus on their children. But then again, parents are also shamed for not spending enough time with their children, and in this day and age, it is common for both parents to have to work to support a family. So this leads to less support and less monitoring of children. So as you can see, these circumstances create a lot of emotional intensity. Goals of therapy. The primary goal is to reduce the overall anxiety of the family system. Interventions should focus on resolving overall family anxiety. It's important to address each individual family member's experiences in terms of triangles, emotional cutoffs, family projections, and transgenerational transmission of abuse, for example. In the end, the aim is to help family members move toward differentiation of self and away from blaming and emotional reactivity. The roles of the therapist. The therapist connects with family without being pulled into a triangle. To do this, the therapist should remain neutral and objective. The therapist does not tell the family what they should or should not do to fix their problems. And the main role is to direct family conversations and facilitate families to accept responsibility for change rather than passively waiting for the therapist to tell them what to do. The first technique that I'm going to talk about is the family diagram. So family diagrams can help families become aware of patterns that have traveled through families through previous generations up until today. They can also highlight things like which sibling is more involved with the parents, circumstances surrounding an emotional cutoff, how extended family might factor into problems, or evidence for certain people being more or less differentiated from the family. So drawing a family diagram together with the family can help highlight these patterns. This can be helpful because the client may not have been aware that the pattern was there, but once recognized, they can learn to act or react in different or more efficient ways within their family. So a little history of the family diagram. The exact date when it was first conceptualized is not known. However, they were regularly used by Bowen and researchers to depict families during their works with the National Institute of Mental Health between 1954 and 1959. So we know it at least goes back that far. And another important point is that the family diagram differs just a little bit from a genogram in what it focuses on. So a genogram focuses on variables like gender, ethnicity, and the family life cycle. And a family diagram pays more attention to facts of functioning of all members of the multi-generational family and how this affects the family's emotional processes. The therapist also uses techniques of differentiation. This can be done by encouraging use of I statements that don't attack or defend other family members. This facilitates greater ownership of the client's emotional responses and minimizes the blaming of others. Starting a statement with "I feel" allows the client to express an opinion without coming across as false or insincere. The third technique I want to talk about is dialogue. In dialogue, family members are facilitated by the therapist to make suggestions about future courses of action and changes to their currently established patterns of reacting to anxiety and tension. Brainstorming together allows them to figure out how to do something different, offering new options of how to react or respond to problems and anger that are less emotional or volatile. And I feel like it's important to point out the importance of facilitated dialogue. Dialogue might seem like a simple concept, but in many families experiencing anxiety, tension, and dysfunction, dialogue might be something that doesn't happen often. It might be the case that one person is telling everyone else what to do. Dialogue, facilitated by the therapist, allows each person to participate in the conversation in a meaningful way. Another technique is detriangling. So this is accomplished by helping clients become aware of and recognize the process that allows triangling to occur in the first place. The therapist uses open-ended questions such as who, what, when, and where to help identify triangles. Murray Bowen felt strongly that therapists should try to minimize the involvement of children in order to prevent parents from using the child as a triangle person for their problems. He felt that parents have greater influence on the system and wanted to prevent children from being pulled in and being used as a replacement person between them. The last technique that I'm going to talk about is coaching. So the therapist uses coaching or teaching to help the family observe patterns of behavior when anxiety and tension between family members escalates. So as mentioned before, the role of the therapist is not to tell the family what to do or how to fix their problems, but by coaching, the therapist can help the family notice patterns they may not have otherwise noticed. So we feel that it's important to point out the limitations of Bowen family system therapy. So the first one is that although this therapy is well known for its effectiveness, there is a limited base of empirical evidence. So although the evidence base is growing, more data, particularly from objective sources, may help confirm its efficacy. A second criticism that we found was that the seemingly unwavering neutrality of the practitioners. Some mental health experts believe that by remaining neutral and unaffected or silent at all costs, practitioners of family systems therapy may be giving tacit approval to any harmful behaviors individuals in therapy may be exposing themselves or other people to. And finally, some people coming to therapy might feel like going back through the generations of their family takes too long, and they just want a therapy that's going to get them to their solutions more quickly. I personally enjoyed learning about Bowen family systems therapy. Learning about it gave me a new way to see my family. I could apply many of the concepts to my family of origin, and it gave me new insight into why people within my family are the way they are. I particularly like the concept of differentiation of self and the family projection process. I can see clearly how some in my family are more differentiated than others, and how this has impacted their lives. I think that all 8 of the key concepts offer a good explanation of why things are happening the way they are within family units, and it offers concrete interventions that target the problem cycles and patterns.
My personal appeal for Bowen family system theory. I find the Bowen family system theory effective because it allowed me to better understand some of the causes of family problems and how to create a healthy environment that improves communication and the cohesion between family members. Another interesting aspect that attracted me to the Bowen family system approach is its effectiveness in reducing anxiety without using medical treatment. Considering these two benefits, I feel drawn to the concept of differentiation and the triangle. Self-differentiation helps me to keep appropriate boundaries while maintaining healthful emotional contact with others. Another thing, as the oldest of my siblings, according to my culture, I am supposed to maintain family cohesion through mediation when necessary. Therefore, understanding how triangles can create tension and prevent family members from addressing the causes of interpersonal issues helps me to promote healthier relationships.